Welcome to the Two-Ton Nerds. As always, my name is Max James. It's October 5th, 2018, which means it's day 5 of the 31 Days of Fright horror movie project, year 7, and today's movie is The Eyes of My Mother. Now, before I jump into telling what you need to know, and my initial response when the final credit rolled up on the screen, is that this month I tried to leave a lot of movies to chance. I chose Feartown USA, which was Day 3's movie, just solely on the poster. A little later in this month, I chose a movie just on a 30-second clip. And for this movie, I just chose this movie simply on the synopsis. That little description that they give on Netflix. To kind of bring you in, just to kind of give you a quick rundown of what to expect in this movie. Now, that's what grabbed me. And that's exactly what I got in this movie, because this movie was really good. Though when the final credit rolled, I thought I really liked it. It's definitely I think this movie is good for one viewing, but it is really good because it's shot in black and white. It is visually stunning. There's a lot of good shots in this movie. It looks phenomenal. The black and white film color, or the lack of color, makes it just so much more of a better film. I think if it was shot in color, I don't think wouldn't have that much impact as it did. So now I'm going to tell you what you need to know about this movie, and first up is the plot. The plot of the movie is broken down into two parts. You got part 1 is mother, and part 2 is father. And first part is her kind of shadowing her mother, kind of just interacting with her mother, because her mother is a surgeon and she is explaining what makes the body work. And on this particular day, she's showing how the eye works. So like I said, this movie is very stunning and very visual, and the first big visual of this movie is a decapitated cow's head sitting on the kitchen table, and they cut the eye open, and I'm pretty sure there's no way of faking it because it looked too real. And they're just casually just handling the cow's head, and it was just like, man, it's like, even though this movie's kind of unsettling because it's how quiet it is, and when the tension rises, that the music goes away, or no sound is audible. It's really great. So, with that being said, the part 1 is it's called Mother because it's her interaction with her mother and the death of her mother, because of an encounter with a rando dude who just happened to show up on their real isolated farm out in the middle of nowhere, and he ends up killing her mother. And she is totally unfazed by this. So, when dad gets home, there's this guy has it out for him. So, he ends up, what I initially thought he was dead, but how wrong I was. A few shots later, they have him chained up in the barn, and they just go bury the mother out in the middle of the woods. So, part 2 is the death of her father, and how she is coping with being all alone, and how she is told she's not right, because I probably shouldn't say that way. She hasn't developed a way to handle the modern world because she's been so isolated from everything, and being traumatized at such a young age. Her world has turned upside down, and so when she finally ventures out into the outside world, she doesn't quite know how to do everything, or her interactions with people is very awkward and just not like how we would normally act with normal human beings. So she ends up bringing a companion home, and that goes horribly wrong. And so she ends up racking up a body count. And what the biggest shocker of me in part 2 was that they kept the guy who killed her mother alive all this time, because there was a huge time jump between part 1 and part 2, and she's now a full-grown adult, and it's like, oh, okay, she's been keeping him as a friend a friend. I think it's more like a pet at this point, and they end up sewing his eyes shut and disabling the vocal cords so he can't see or talk or scream. So it's basically a pet. And she does this once more in the movie, but this is where the problem rises. It eventually backfires on her, and then I'm not going to tell you what exactly happens, but it ultimately comes back to haunt her doing this particular thing to somebody else. So, now, with all that said, the biggest problem was that I didn't know how to rate this movie. The movie's relatively short. It's only about an hour and 16 minutes long, which actually doesn't feel like an hour and 60-minute long movie. It flows by pretty fast. So I was like, oh man, this movie's going to drag on so much. But actually, it goes by really fast. Once the movie gets going, it goes. And it keeps going. And then before you realize it, the movie's over. So, now, I have a rating scale. 1 being your run-of-the-mill horror. 2, best watch with a group. 3, more than average horror but adds nothing new to the horror genre. 4, helps move the horror genre forward. And 5, being a horror classic. I think this has the potential to be a horror classic because that's why I don't quite know how to rate this, because it's really good movie because it's different. And that's kind of why I'm putting it as a 4. It helps move the horror genre forward because not all horror movies have to be scary or loud or just have like a slasher or like a true villain of the movie. Where this movie it's quiet. There is some sympathy for the main character. At least early on in the movie, there's some sympathy for her. There's the way it's shot, the way it's looked, the overall feel of it. It does make it feel like it's almost a horror classic in my mind because it's so close, but it helps move the horror genre forward in the sense that it proves, like I said, it proves that it doesn't need all those things to be a good horror movie. It can be quiet. It can be just, the tension can be just as simple as someone just kind of like fondling their way through an open field and trying to escape while their eyes have been shown shut, and then as simple as just watching someone walk right up to him with a knife, and you just know what's going to happen, but you don't quite know when it's going to happen or how, and there's no music, so it's just like, that's perfect. I love that. So, it's a 4. It helps move the horror genre forward because a lot of the movies on this year's list is what I would consider more traditional horror, where this one is very different in a lot of horror movies that I normally watch, and that's what sticks out with me, and that's why it's a solid 4. Helps move the horror genre forward, where it helps break the standard of horror movies. So, oh man, I didn't think I would be talking about this movie that much. I thought it'd be just a quick review, but I actually thought this was actually more in depth than I thought I would go into. So, which is a nice mark of excellence in my opinion. So, with all that said, my name is Max James, coming from the basement, and I'm going to go geek out.